What's cracking, yo? Welcome back to Boo TV. Appreciate you for stopping in. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, stay notified, and let's get into the topic for today. What's cracking? What's cracking? What's cracking? Back with some more Michael Jordan content. Found a new channel that has a lot of really interesting, good, insightful content that I would like to take a look at what this channel has to offer and give my opinion on their videos. This channel is called Thinking Basketball, and like I said, I'm going to go through and from time to time check out the content there and react to it because they got some great topics there. But this one, detailed Michael Jordan analysis using new data to gauge his impact, episode 6, so greatest peaks. So yeah, I like stuff like this. Can learn a lot from it, get into the nitty gritty of athletes' careers and really get all the context and dig into the details and add to my knowledge base as much as I can. All right, so no further ado, let's get into it.
You know Michael Jordan. You know his legendary moments. You know that fadeaway. You know his aerial gifts. But do you know what made him unique as a scorer? The ins and outs of his passing game, his defensive strengths and weaknesses. Jordan's mystique grew in the 90s, but did he actually reach his peak before he ever hoisted a championship trophy? And were those the best seasons that we've ever seen on a basketball court?
You are watching what greatness is all about.
Where's Larry Bird in all this?
Has it blocked by Elijah Wan. Michael Jordan saves the day.
This series tackles one question. Who was the best at his best? We start at the ABA merger and go through the best multi-year stretches, examining the legends who provided the most on-court impact. These are the greatest peaks.
Already loving this. Oh, baby.
He's the best athlete. He's one of the best competitors. He's one of the most skilled players. And that, to me, makes him the best basketball player that I've ever seen play.
In this series, we've seen how big men ruled the game for decades, and how the offensive brilliance of Magic Johnson and Larry Bird reimagined what taller players could do. But there were high-flying wings with offensive success in the 60s and 70s, too. Elgin Baylor was the first superstar who really attacked vertically off the bounce. Then Julius Erving and David Thompson extended that approach. As a kid growing up in North Carolina, Jordan idolized Thompson, who combined an explosive first step with a little skywalking to finish third in MVP voting in 1978. Jordan was the next leap in that evolutionary chain, and his incredible first step set a new standard for attacking the rim. When he entered the league, Michael could just teleport around defenders with his burst, able to get around players in just a single step. And even though he was a hair slower by 1989, this incredible acceleration was always the foundation of Jordan's success. He'd burn defenders to the right or to the left with this penetration, and he was so quick that blinking was dangerous. Joe Dumars flinches at a turnaround here and then becomes a turnstile. There wasn't anything special about this being a first step. It was just mind-bending acceleration. Jordan's like a Formula One car racing against Priuses. That acceleration shot him out of a cannon, and that speed was a launch pad for his vertical finishing. He's flying by the second step here, and that helps him actually fly. Really, the man spent so much time in the air he could have registered a tail number with the FAA. Some of these drives remind me of a running back turning the corner, where he'd take off and get really low, then transfer all that energy into his leaping. Note how his body protects the ball here as he hovers to the other side of the rim. And he leveraged his body as an airborne shield like this, especially when jumping off of 2 feet into contact. Michael was strong enough to absorb hits while airborne like this, and these physical gifts helped him reach the line at historically prolific rates. Magic kept defenses off balance with his playmaking, but Michael simply overwhelmed them with relentless pressure on the rim. His huge hands helped make some of this aerial wizardry possible, manipulating the ball in the air on these drives or holding it away from shot blockers. That's near the top of the square on the release, and these things were so big that the ball could slip off mid-shot, and he could still reset it in his catcher's mitts like nothing happened. Of course, the hang time also makes this work too, contorting and bending his body around bigger defenders in the paint. Jordan displayed the most fluid body control of perhaps any player ever, slithering around opponents as he floated into a clear shot attempt. And we haven't even mentioned his footwork, which was balletic at times, allowing him to keep his balance while pivoting around like a top, and then that hanging aerial control to still square his shoulders on the shot. His legs were kicked out on the foul here, and it didn't matter. All that hovering and twisting helped Michael's mid-range game too. His typical pull-ups were supercharged with that elevation, hitting a trampoline and then firing over defenders. And whether he was twisting, leaning, or stopping on a dime, he could square his shoulders and still shoot. And this kinesthetic mastery made his famous dagger against Cleveland in 1989 possible, where he pumps and hangs, but right there squares himself comfortably and strokes it. Incredible. We shouldn't overlook his shooting from the mid-range either. He was an 85% free throw shooter during these years and was a knockdown shooter inside 20 feet when given space. But he also created space vertically with that leaping ability, changing directions and springing clear for a good look. Michael didn't make thousands of jumpers with a hand in his face. He made thousands by jumping so high, his releases were rarely ever bothered. As you've probably noticed, his handle was good enough to support sharp cuts, and he really liked this low in and out dribble to set up defenders and probe for open space. He wasn't an incredible ball handler, but he was good enough to knife around the court, and since he could also score at the basket with either hand, Jordan's robust repertoire made him the greatest scorer in NBA history. If we look at 3-year playoff stretches and adjust for inflation to 2020 scoring rates, Jordan scored an astounding 34 points every 75 possessions on true shooting 7% better than average from 1989 to 1991. He holds the top 9 stretches in postseason scoring rate, peaking in the late 80s and early 90s when his explosiveness was still intact and his mid-range accuracy was dialed in. He could always fall back on his most iconic move, the fadeaway. You see what I did there? Sometimes MJ would get right into this off the catch, and that hang time and separation created really clean releases. He preferred going to his right hand on this move until about 1990 or 1991, when that vintage fade to the other side started popping up more regularly. I recommend Kyle Mann's History of the Fadeaway for more on this shot. Since the triangle offense organically generated post-ups, Phil Jackson's arrival in 1991 facilitated more fadeaways for Jordan. Here's a great counter cut, audibling off this route with the defender overplaying him and flashing right back to the low block for the catch and turn. Michael's agility helped him off ball too, using screens and setting up opponents for sharp changes in direction that freed him up. So much of Chicago's offense before Phil Jackson was bringing Jordan off picks from the baseline, and since he was comfortable flowing into attacks like this since his college days, the activity and principles of the triangle helped harness his off-ball movement. The triangle offense prioritizes balancing the floor and ball movement, principles that played right into Jordan's strengths as a catch-and-go scorer. While Michael could read screens and then flash to open areas well, he could also punish ball denial with that quick change of direction, and with increased space he was so hard to contain. These back cuts were organic, feeling an overplay then darting free to the bucket. And his movement meant defenses always had to worry about him. He cuts right out of traps like this instead of idling, and even when it...
That is one thing I've always said about Mike and other players like Mike that have either played in a triangle or played in some type of system, but the ones that aren't necessarily ball dominant, or once they get rid of the ball, they just sit in a corner and watch and wait and be stagnant and not move. It's like, no. I don't think Mike gets enough credit for continuously moving, and even when he didn't have the ball, even if it means just fighting for his position in the post, but he never let his defenders off the hook. Now, I'm not saying he was running around like Steph Curry, sprinting across the court, sprinting around 3 screens, coming around curls. Not to that level, but he was constantly moving and never let the defense off the hook. Always pressure. Same thing with Kobe. Always pressure. Same thing with Bird. Always pressure.
A teammate misses him, those cuts could lead to rebounds. All his activity and his athleticism made him an excellent offensive rebounder, which is often overlooked because he was usually doing the
Yes, Michael Jordan grabbed a ton of offensive rebounds in his career. A ton.
shooting, but this added additional off-ball value to his game. On the other hand, his weakness as an off-ball player was his three-point shooting, where he peaked at 34% on low volume. It didn't seem to matter if these were pull-ups or catch-and-shoot chances, but I do think Jordan's release at the apex of his huge jump limited his range to a degree. When the NBA shortened the line to 22 feet in 1995, Mike made 38% on over 750 attempts before struggling again when the line returned to 24 feet. Otherwise, Jordan was such a dynamic scorer that he flummoxed almost any defense of the time. The Bad Boys Pistons dented him slightly, but that's about it. And yet, despite his otherworldly scoring gifts, he wouldn't have 6 championships without a huge part of his game that is often overlooked.
Passing. Yes, believe it or not.
Michael Jordan is retired.
Faked his own retirement. I don't know. I know he loves basketball. He's probably playing in his backyard with his kids, but I don't think he faked his retirement.
When Michael was younger, he was often criticized for shooting into double teams frequently. And while his athleticism was breathtaking, his shot selection was questionable at times. Some of these were really difficult attempts. He was so skilled that it's hard to say he took poor shots per se, but MJ was frequently doubled or tripled and bypassed wide open teammates for some of these attempts. Given his high volume shooting, there are few players in NBA history who shot into extra coverage while a teammate was open more than Michael Jordan. Now, without strong three-point shooting teammates back then, missing these spot-up shooters probably didn't hurt that much. And more importantly, these missed passes were easily outweighed by all of the open shots Michael did set up. His constant penetration collapsed defenses into the lane, and when he did opt to pass, Chicago ended up with wide open looks. That last play was a jump pass, and Jordan often went airborne for a shot before checking down to an open shooter like this. That Luigi hang time helped him to react to defensive decisions before finally passing the mic to a bandmate. These jump passes set up more than just outside shots. Jordan preferred to hit teammates in the lane, and his go-to playmaking move was drawing a defender away from the rim as he hovered, then throwing one right to that vacated spot.
Yep.
Mike loved this jump and dump laydown, where he drove to the basket and then with the big man stepped up to help, found a way to drop it off for a layup. These were some of his best passes, and he really dialed them in during the 1991 playoffs when he anticipated these little openings more and used his parasailing ability to exploit them more consistently.
Yeah, man, that 91 finals, I think he averaged over 10 assists. Can't remember if he hit the 11 mark, but he was getting a lot of people involved in that 91 finals. Led the series in assists per game. That's what Magic Johnson on the floor.
However, leaving his feet like this caused some issues when he decided not to shoot, holding a hot potato while hovering with no clear outlet. When he was in the air like this, he was at the mercy of whatever was open. He switches to a pass here, but there's nothing really there. And another problem with passing like this is avoiding all the contesting arms and hands, so many of these balls were deflected. And as a result, his reactionary jump passes led to a number of his turnovers.
Yep, that's true.
Jordan rarely anticipated openings as a passer. This is a simple lead pass to the streaking Horace Grant, but he had to throw it early and he sees it late, and then he thinks better of it. Here, he doesn't realize this teammate is uncovered, and so it's a dubious jumper instead of a layup pass. On this one, Scottie Pippen's backdoor cut opens a lob, but Jordan sees it after it's free, then fires it, and man, could Pippen pass. Most of Michael's best dimes were more reactive, seeing an opening and then whipping it to a teammate. Despite his reputation, he was always a willing passer, and learning more angles and reads over the years helped him drop higher level dimes like this. He threw in a bit of manipulation beyond that jump pass, going to the look-away at times, and this is his peak passing in 1991, moving the defender with his eyes, then impersonating Magic in front of Irvin himself. Jordan was also willing to look ahead for outlet passes. This is one of his better ones, and he was a good transition passer, dropping a brilliant dime on the break every once in a while too. To be fair, he missed plenty of good passes in these spots as well. Pippen's clear here, and flying into the lane, that familiar drop-off is open. In studying passers over the years, the great ones will find about 90% of these open looks, whereas Michael connected on them about 66% of the time. But keep in mind the sheer volume of open chances he carved out by drawing attention away from his teammates with his perpetual scoring pressure.
Yes.
In the playoffs, there are no more than 5 players in NBA history who created more shots for teammates than Jordan, and if we use the same playmaking estimates from the prior episode, Michael set up his teammates for an open look an estimated 14 times every 100 possessions, a stretch only bested by the game's top offensive engines from the last 15 years. And so, while Jordan was revered for winning 10 scoring titles, he was one of the all-time playmaking machines in league history. That raised a weak roster and carried a strong one later on. From 1985 to 1989, before Scottie Pippen emerged and the triangle took hold, the Bulls' offensive efficiency was only around league average. There was only so much Michael could do as the lone offensive force on a defensively constructed roster.
Said Mike did everything he could. That roster for quite some time was not good. Pippen came in years later. Pippen didn't even start his rookie year. Pippen was coming off the bench. Took Pippen a few years till he was really Mike's wingman. Horace Grant too. Horace Grant came in raw. You know. But hey, Mike went out swinging every season, I'll tell you that.
Pippen's emergence gave the Bulls another elite finisher and secondary scoring weapon, but more importantly, another playmaker. Scottie's passing is historically under-discussed, and he was a deadly grab-and-go player, either finding layups in transition or doing the damage himself as he came down the lane. Pip was also one of the all-time great wing defenders, and that, along with his unselfishness, made him a near-perfect complementary piece next to Michael. Jordan himself improved as a passer at the end of the 80s and into the 90s, and with better teammates, the Bulls roared to some of the best offensive seasons on record, right behind Magic's Lakers. And when we think of Magic as having everything run through him on offense, Michael's combination of scoring and playmaking gave him one of the highest offensive loads in playoff history. While Jordan's passing highs were mixed with some blemishes, his defense was even more boom or bust. The highlight reels where he's flying all around the court overlook all of his strikeouts and instead focus on his impressive home runs. For instance, jumping passing lanes like this might produce his most valuable defensive plays. These interceptions could be huge, pick sixes that went the other way for easy points.
But gambling.
And at times Jordan was like a cornerback sitting on a passing route with elite closing speed.
The thing about those, like, you miss, well then there's an open man. Gotta be careful with your gambles.
1989, Ty aficionado and coach Doug Collins busted out a half-court trap at times, allowing MJ to size up cross-court passes and then turn them into easy offense. But these gambles whiffed as well. Michael would sell out for them frequently, and in this case he can cover this kick-out pass here, but is going for more with this steal, and that can lead to wide-open looks. By my eye, Jordan hit pay dirt more often than not, but there was a tax to pay for these steal attempts. He could get in passing lanes without gambling, reacting quickly in short space with the defensive equivalent of his first step. This is a bread and butter cross screen of the era, and Jordan not only switches it, but pounces like a black cat. And he could shoot the gap with that burst. This pass is airborne for less than half a second, and, well, Michael's airborne for more than half a second. Michael's quickness helped him keep smaller, shifty point guards in front of him, and on the outside he could churn his feet while swiveling his hips to the dribbler in textbook fashion. For instance, he often guarded Isaiah Thomas during the bad boy battles, and MJ's acceleration allowed him to recover laterally at times, and his combination of size, strength, and agility held Isaiah below his normal scoring numbers in those matchups. But that Kenny Rogers gambling was part of his man defense too. Michael would backpedal to recover a lot, and his preferred move there was to swipe down for the steal as he slid in front of a dribbler. There was a lot of swiping, actually, spamming the Y button at times, and plenty of them connected, but they also gave opponents openings that would have been way harder to find if Jordan had just played it straight up. When he wasn't swiping at the rock, he was reaching, first on Joe Dumars here, then another reach around for the steal. He lunged for steals a lot on the block like this, and here that lets the smaller Bryant shot turn clear for an easy look.
You got to look at that activity on that Pistons highlight there. I mean, he's everywhere, man. He doesn't, if he has to switch over to he's there on the next defender, there on the switch, being a little gnat, being pesky. The activity, the intensity. Ooh.
Look, MJ did flick plenty of balls this way, leading to deflections or turnovers, man, but he was usually overly aggressive with his move, lurching at air not once on this play, but twice, leading to a layup. He brought those same habits to the post, the swipe down move or a little flick, and, well, he stripped opponents some time. I think he was better off playing straight up against post players and using his athleticism and strength to contest. Against our old friend Magic in the 1991 finals, Jordan gambled, and then gambled, and then gambled, and was absolutely torched by the bigger Johnson in the post. On occasion, Chicago sent a second defender, and you know what happened. Another defensive gambit Jordan loved was the surprise double team, where he ambushed unsuspecting players and let those giant hands pickpocket people. As Karl Malone knows all too well, these well-timed sniper shots worked against the deliberate post-ups of the 80s and 90s. Of course, there was a small price to pay when he couldn't cash in on these, because it left his mark wide open without structured rotations, and even after this play turns into a more standard trap, it's Jordan's man who was wide open the whole time on the other side of the court. Michael just had an unquenchable thirst to make plays on defense back then. He's guarding a shooter here, but drifts into the paint looking for action, and that was Randy Whitman's fourth straight jumper.
To be fair, if the team sees you got a double team going on, you got a guy trapped, and they've had him trapped for a significant amount of time, enough for the rest of the defense to read the floor and make sure you guys know who that extra man is, and you're covering the space the best way you can.
Jordan lurked like this because he did make a ton of plays from the paint. One of his favorites was swooping in at the exact moment post players were shooting. And MJ was one of the best shot blocking guards of all time. Able to leverage that athleticism to hang and reach shots. And this gave him a level of rim protection that most guards couldn't match. These saves at the hoop were high value plays, and that defies physics.
You would be floating above the ground, never touching the surface.
Even with a little less verticality, by 1990 or 91, he could still fly in and save the day. This play from 1989 demonstrates the big payoff of Jordan lurking near the lane. He's able to stop a dunk, and this quick reaction and elevation would be elite even for a big man. Those aerial superpowers even allowed him to protect the rim from behind. He served as a backstop here by flying in from the free throw line on this incredible rotation. I don't know about you, but I find Jordan's high-risk defensive style to be difficult to evaluate. If we look at our historical impact metrics, he's right at the top of the heap, with a nice lead in my box plus minus model, but it's difficult for stats like these to handle defense well. And what we really care about is overall impact. So the team here at Thinking Basketball combed through nearly 200 old Jordan games to calculate his plus minus and give us a better picture of his impact. In the playoffs from 1989 to 1991, Jordan's Bulls were outscored by 12 points every 48 minutes when he sat on the bench, but they outscored opponents by 8 points when he played. There's some noise in stats like these, but Chicago's 20-point increase with Jordan in the game would rank 9th since the league began tracking this in 1997, which puts him up with the all-time results, but certainly doesn't separate him from the pack. As we've seen, he was quick to rotate most of the time. Here the play unfolds rapidly and Michael jumps on the threat. But I wouldn't say he had great help awareness. He's late recognizing this despite a teammate pointing it out, and he could become momentarily preoccupied with action in front of him, forgetting to rotate for a second. He was a strong enough defensive rebounder as a guard that it probably added some value to his defensive game. And given all of his defensive strengths and weaknesses, I view him overall as a strong all-league defender, but not quite an all-time defensive wing. There are still larger questions to think about here. How would he fit next to a post player who wanted the ball more? Are there diminishing returns next to a ball-dominant star? And what's his legacy look like if Scottie Pippen never emerged? What's undeniable is that Jordan was the first perimeter player to dominate with mega scoring and playmaking, which puts him in the conversation for greatest offensive player ever, and given his defensive impact, it's easy to see why Michael Jordan is often considered the greatest basketball player of all time. For more historical content and to support this channel, head over to patreon.com/thinkingbasketball and check out Thinking Basketball, the book, on Amazon. That goes deeper on a number of ideas explored in this series. There are also longer discussions on many of these players on the Thinking Basketball podcast. And if you're curious about stats from this video, there's an entire stat series on this channel. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one, and that wherever you are, and given his
to this
defensive impact,
I wanted to read this. Offense, first step in aerial control, led to all-time penetrator, elite mid-range pull-up. Yeah, huge playmaker with good reactive passing, active off-ball cuts and rebounding, shooting into doubles or stuck in the air. With three-point shooter, defense, excellent passing lanes and active strong hands. Good man D versus smaller guys. Some rim protection with good but not great. Excellent rebounder, lots of gamblings to many air intervals. Vulnerable in post. Yeah, pretty much just a recap of everything he just said. Yeah, listen, Mike, one of the great, in terms of all around, when you consider, first of all, he's one of the greatest, if not the greatest, defender at the shooting guard position. Especially, hold on a second, especially when you consider how much energy he's expending on both sides of the court. Especially considering how much of an offensive load he had to carry to be able to still exert the amount of defensive pressure and energy that he did on the other end of the floor. It's miraculous, because sure, you can find players probably at that position where their primary task and all they were asked to do was to defend, and they had not much of a role carved out for them offensively. It allowed them. It's much easier to be a great defender in those positions, but when you got to carry a load on both ends of the floor and still be at a high level on both ends, that speaks volumes. So I take that into consideration as well. So, hey, but this was a fantastic breakdown. I liked it. That was good stuff. That was good stuff. Thinking basketball. Thinking basketball. You ain't got a whole lot of rebuttals from me on this one. It was solid. It was for the most part solid. Yeah, Mike was definitely a gambler. Yeah, he was a swiper, especially when he get in the air. But here's one of my favorite types of blocks when he get in the air. Yeah, he just come over horizontally, horizontally with the arm. God, Mike was a beast, man. Mike was a beast. I just loved his energy and his tenacity on the defensive end. Like on the switches, he'd bolt to the next defender, harass him, using his hands, swiping like he said, reaching, swiping, passing. Oh, Bodo, I seen him cover like 2 or 3 guys in a small amount of time, and I'm just like, man, this guy is a pit bull. Sheesh, I've seen that happen a lot. Anyway, y'all let me know what you think about it. Appreciate you for stopping in. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, stay notified, and I'll catch y'all in the next one. We out, baby.